show. And I must tell you that 2020 has been quite a year. Not a good one in a lot of ways. A lot of stress. Had the awful virus. We've had an election year that's been quite contentious. And now we got the normal stresses coming up, in that the holidays are coming up.
Yeah,
So good morning, girls. How you doing?
great. How are you?
Well, I'm good. I'm looking forward to the show. We're going to talk about, we came into 2020 with kind of the normal expectations.
Yeah,
For last year, we were very optimistic about having an exciting year. Didn't turn out that way, but it began with expectations and enthusiasms. And in our January show, we actually kicked off with a kind of a retrospective of the 60s. And y'all were alive in the 60s, were you not?
Oh, yes.
Well,
Yeah.
what do you recall from that show?
well, I recall the talking about, the wars and everything else, but on a positive note, we were talking about fashion. I mean, we really made a lot of fashion statements during that period. And I still wear my tie-dye just about every day during the week, somewhere at home, or even out getting my mail. I've got on a tie-dye.
Well, that's good that it lasted that long. Did you buy any new shirts?
Yeah. I've been looking for some, but I can't find them everywhere, the ones I want.
Well, as you know, the 60s started off on kind of a down note with the Cuban Missile Crisis and assassination of JFK, assassination of Martin Luther King. And, we learned some lessons there, some hard lessons. We didn't know how crazy the rest of the decade would be.
Oh.
But we didn't know how those lessons we learned would inform our future behavior. But let's take a look back and take a look at some of those early episodes. The biggest concern for me in the late 60s anyway, I was in college at an Ivy League school in New York, Cornell, and it seemed like every day there was a protest. You were burning your draft card, you were burning your bra, you were protesting the racist society every day. Mm-hmm. Now that affects you in a way. I was not part of those protests, but they affected me in ways that probably still impact my life today. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The outrage, the realization that you could go off to a jungle where you didn't care about the war and get killed. That was what was scary. Mm-hmm. And it was on every male's mind in those years. Mm-hmm. And my personal experience was that I graduated in 1969 and became 1A and got drafted 8 months later. Mm-hmm. I mean, and so, that stuff really happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And the people today in the States don't realize what a critical time that was in a young person's life, and the impact it had on me is it shaped my entire future. Mm-hmm. My entire future. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, you say, well, how did the 60s impact you? And they're all very glib. Oh, man, I don't remember the 60s.
They were stoned out of their minds.
Stoned, man.
Yeah.
But that's just a cover-up. Everybody was affected.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a child of the 60s, so I grew up in the 60s in Louisiana. My father was a Baptist minister, so we were very active in the civil rights movement. And that encouraged me to just move forward and at all times take a look at what's going on around you and be a part of the improvement of all that's around you. So to bless somebody because you are allowed to live.
Okay, interesting interview as well. And
Yeah.
Margie, you made a comment about in the early 60s not feeling safe, and living through turbulent times. Don't you find that kind of similar to 2020?
Well, I do. And, when I look back, and that was the very first time that I think America felt a little disarmed. And yes, some of that has returned to me, but I think throughout these past 50 years, there have been other incidents, and I think we've been concerned about them. But I think it's louder now because of the internet. It's more, people can say what they want. They can be anonymous. So yeah, it's kind of the same, but the only redeeming quality is that we recovered from the 60s. So we need to do that again.
Yeah. But you know what? We got a lot of growth that our generation has had. And I kind of liken it to old vine wines because, you know, I'm a wine enthusiast. And to me, that 60s was like a foundation for our growth and brought us to where we are now. And we have now a new vintage that can be exciting, tasty, and have new harmonies, new hope. I think we have now a foundation where we can more easily grow from that. We have to kind of surround the youth and some of the younger millennials and all the other names that they call them now to kind of help them deal with it. But I think we are more versed in how to deal with it.
Well, of course, we didn't know what was coming, and what came in the later part of the 60s was, of course, the Vietnam War, Civil Rights Act, and overt racism, acts of racism, the emergence of radical, I'll call it radical, but the emergence of feminism, protest, and so on and so forth. But I think when we got through to the end of the 60s, we had what I would call an attitude of what is possible rather than being restricted to more traditional mores or ways of living, and ultimately one of the most exciting decades ever. What do you think?
Well, I think it was an upbeat one also when we look beyond the tragedies. Think of the music. You know, we alluded to that, the music that was created and the joy and the uplifting that, and we still remember that today. When I think of the 60s now, I think of those positive things like the Beatles, like the new music, like the twist, like all those things we talked about. And I think that's a good indicator that we will never forget it, but we have it in its place and we can take with us the enjoyments that we felt.
Definitely. The music is still a foundation today for the music that is being made. And I know the three of us still dance to those old tunes.
Well, occasionally. Well, do you think we've got the potential here in the 2020s for a similar decade where we've learned so many lessons from this particular year that we'll move forward with new ways of doing things, excitement about getting back to a new kind of, what I'll call a new kind of normal? And, what's the potential in your view?
Well, we've got the opportunity and we've got the lessons learned, like John Lewis says, making good trouble. I think now we've got an audience that is so diverse that it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a melting pot and really reflect who we are as a nation. I'm really excited about it.
And I think we have to have the attitude of recovery. I think we have to crawl out of this. If this were my grandmother, she said, no, you don't have to throw away that torn shirt. We're going to mend it. And I think that's kind of the mindset that we have to go forward with, is that, oh, it's been really, it's been tragic. But you know what? We've dusted off before and we walked forward. And that is what, as Americans, we should be doing. And I don't know who will lead the way. It's going to take a pack of us, but we have to be determined to do it.
Well, let me just mention, I think I forgot to say, I'm sitting here at the studio. We are on a Zoom meeting, but I'm sitting here in the studio without a mask, which is a change because I'm on a remote camera with no one in the room. But coming along with change and new freedoms came with a sense of responsibility. Responsibility to handle those freedoms in a responsible way, in an appropriate way, and to move forward in a positive manner. And one of those things we talked about earlier in the year was the importance of having a sense of awareness and the importance of etiquette. And is etiquette is there a place for etiquette in today's world? And we got, into some interesting discussions, had some interesting interviews, which we'll review in a minute. But where do you come down on that now after coming through a period where everyone seems to be a little bit off their normal feet?
I think it's up to us to reinstitute etiquette. I think that, like I was looking at Saturday Night Live, it's an opportunity to make a statement and be a friend, and those random acts of kindness. I think if we start doing those kinds of things, we're going to have those aha moments where people are going to say, I like that. I like how it makes me feel. And I want to do that for the next person.
Well,
Yeah, I think it's
okay,
up to
I
us,
agree with that. Go ahead, Marge.
Well, we can't legislate it. And I think that, excuse me, we also won't have a quick turnover of attitude. When we think about what a conflict is, it's a struggle for dominance of one's values and beliefs and practices. That's not going to go away real soon. And we can only do it as from our perspective and who we are. But I think we can interject ourselves when others are having conversations about how terrible it is, or what about that group, or, making judgments about people. I think we probably need to be the steady factor there and
Yes.
bring a little positive thinking into it. And there's something I just picked up on internet this morning, and it says, life may not be the party we hope for, but while we're here, we should dance. And I'm going to use that once in a while, because I think there's the sour and the attitudes of disobedience are going to be with us for a while. And there's also going to be another subset of person that won't be happy going forward after January. So, we can't all be, it'd be very boring to all be on the same point, but we really need to do our part.
We don't have to buy into that behavior either. Just because someone is being a sour grape, we don't have to endorse it, and we don't have to be around it. We can elect to walk away. It's just like if you're in a situation where you can fight or flight, maybe it's better to flight. And that's a message too, that
Well,
you're
I
not
think-
going to accept it.
I think one of the things we talked about that was maybe a positive is a lot of people have become more sensitive or more aware to a person's particular place in life. In other words, there may be more to a person than you're looking at, more to the book than the cover.
The death,
Has
yeah.
its own set of challenges in addition to the negative aspects of quarantine and virus and toxic elections and so on and so forth. And I think that if we take advantage of that little nuance and react to it with a positive attitude, that perhaps we'll get through the 2020s in a much more positive way.
And Doug, that also means that we have to listen. We have to ask the questions and perhaps not react to that immediate statement or that immediate demeanor of that person.
Okay? How about that? How about that?
And we don't have to try to talk them into believing what we believe. They're as entitled as we are. And
Yes,
sometimes we just have to say, you know what? We don't agree. That's fine. We agree on so many other things. We're friends, and let's move forward. And maybe this is a topic we agree that we do not talk about.
let's have that glass of wine and go on.
You're right.
All right, well, let's take a look back at one of our earlier shows and get some comments from not only us, but residents.
Yeah, let me personalize this a little. I already have, but isn't becoming aware of how your behavior affects others part of this whole picture? In other words, have a sense of awareness.
Definitely.
I mean, if you come into a situation, you have to have some awareness of the situation and how your behavior impacts it.
Without question. It's the basis for getting an understanding of what the two of you agree on to start with, and then from there branching out to some differences that you might have, but also being able to discuss those on a friendly basis.
correct. And yes, I do believe there is a place in today's society for etiquette. It's something we've lost, and it's sad. We grew up having to open the door for people and say thank you and just be respectful. And I think that's what the bottom line is. It shows respect for others around you rather than so focused on ourselves.
Well, you know, the solution is obviously begins with us
Yes.
Yes,
and
definitely.
how we act. I think.
Yes, I think so. And an example that we can look to, and recently, in the last few months, a friend and I were out having lunch, and next to us was a young family, little children, and there was no phone in sight. These were two separate restaurants, just a few weeks apart, and they were having this great conversation. And isn't it pitiful that I noticed that rather than it being the exception? And we decided that in both instances, after we finished our meal, we would approach that family and commend them and let them know that we noticed.
That's great. That's great.
And I think that's the issue, is that people don't know the difference. They don't care about the difference. So unless we become that difference,
and acknowledge it like you did.
and
Yeah.
with technology, even how we handle that, how we make comments about when you have 4 people in one screen on a network that's arguing and shouting over each other, is that a teaching moment? And maybe that's, and you mentioned this earlier, what can we do to not lose our own capacity for this? Because I think we're all saying we kind of know about etiquette, we know about manners, we were taught. I will probably not say yes, sir, to anybody, but I can sure look them in the eye. So it starts with those small steps. My concern is that when this generation is gone, who's going to pick up the gauntlet?
You know, ladies, after looking at that, one of the important things we said was the importance of having role models. And who might be a role model today, in today's world. And why not us? You know, why not be that role model so that you can be a leader or a mentor in the coming years? Certainly, we need some of that. And we started talking about, you know, behavior during the crises, and we may be in a real culture war here, but role modeling and the lessons learned that when we were in our formative years were very important.
Well, I think we have to remember that the counter culture is most likely a much smaller group than the mainstream. And the counterculture, I mean, we call the counterculture, there are many of them, anybody that, you know, doesn't agree with what the mainstream thinking is. But I think that we're always going to have them. And if we can look at them as maybe being a plus in our lives, maybe we have a few opinions that are shared that give us something to think about, not to change us, just as we're not going to change them, but have a healthy discussion. Right now it's so, you know, don't step over here because I'm on this side and you're on that side. And we need to take those barriers down. And who was it that said, why can't we all just love each other? Well, it hasn't worked, and it probably won't till life ends. But I think we agree that we just need to be aware, don't run from the situations, take the opportunity to bring it back to saying, don't we live in a great world? You know, and things are going to be better. We have a responsibility to help make it that way.
And as seasoned citizens, there's more of us, you know, the baby boomers, and therefore we have a great opportunity to meld and to help and, as you say, be a model for the younger generations.
Well, I think that's right. I think role modeling starts with us. I think more of us need to say, okay, we've come through some tough times here, and there are some people we disagree with out there, but generally develop an attitude, what I call an attitude of gratitude for being able to deal with these issues and being able to come out the other side with an outlook that will that means successful relationships and success for you in the future. That's what we all want. That's what we all want to return to, is a more normal lifestyle, a more gracious lifestyle. and to stop worrying about what other people are doing and maybe figure out what's important to us.
My thought was along those same lines is that, we don't need to, to stoke the fire. It is better for us to just take a step back and say, oh, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, and we don't have to, it'd be pretty boring if everybody disagreed. But we can be that change agent, maybe for one person, maybe for a relative, maybe
Right.
for a neighbor down the street. I shouldn't say we will be the change agent, but we can sure attempt to be, and it just might happen because it's individual by individual.
And with the holidays coming up, we're going to sometimes be in a greater than two situation where conversations will come up and we can elect how we want to react to them.
Well, I think that's right. And let's take a look back at some of the video moments we had discussing these issues, and also see what some residents had to say.
There's a bigger issue here, and I think part of it you just alluded to is that there's a culture war going on, an absolute culture war, and that it's a battle for what values are important and are sustainable, and what needs to be modified maybe, and what we learn.
My dad had many practical sayings, and one of them that really stuck with me was, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I carried that in my heart and in my hands and in my head. And when I came to be an elementary teacher, I carried that out in the classroom. And I would put that all over the place, just as a reminder to the kids. It's there's such a difference when you put, a lot of yourself into your work. It will, in the end, have lots of positive results.
So the saying that has impacted my life in many, many respects is never quit, never give up. Throughout my career, both in personal and professional life, we all have stumbles. We all have things that happen, and that's just life. But perseverance is the key to success. And I was taught by my dad early on, never give up, never quit. Find a way around the issue and persevere. And so that's led me to where I am today, which I'm still here, so I guess it worked.
Okay, well, that was quite interesting, especially when we started talking about what's universal and what isn't, and what we can aspire to in terms of having values that are enduring and that we can pass along. And some of the sayings that our mentors came up with when we were young were just priceless. In any event, ladies, we have come to the end of 2020. We're facing the holidays. I think that these will be much more subdued, muted celebrations. I, for one, am sort of toning it down this year on all of the Thanksgiving, Christmas stuff, and trying to live through and discover what's really more important than frivolity and dinner and seeing people. What's most important to me is the value system I have, the faith I have, and the knowledge that things will get better and that I can be a part of it.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to 2021 and the ball drop, if it drops, or the cup drop, or the glass click, whatever. But I'm done with 2020 and I'm looking to 2021.
How about you, Margie?
Well, I guess my parting thought would be kind of Pollyanna. Look at the eyes above the mask, smile. They may smile back, say a word, acknowledge somebody's presence. It may be the only attention they get all day.
Well, I think those are words to live by. I think in 2021, I would like to adopt some more normal expectations. I know that we're not through crises yet, but I would like to find some semblance of the joy I had of living here and living life in my later years. And if we can develop that sense of joy and that sense of, community again, the way we always have, then I think 2021 will be an excellent year. I'd like to end the show just by saying, have a Merry Christmas, have a Happy Hanukkah, Celebrate the holidays however you wish. And we will look forward to seeing you on our January show of The Breeze. See you then.